after 10. For half a century, it's been one of the world's greatest unsolved murder cases. The so-called Zodiac Killer terrorized communities in Northern California in the late 60s, killing at least 5 people. Just last week, it looked like there'd been a major breakthrough when a group of volunteer investigators claimed they'd solved the mystery and identified the killer. However, the police and the FBI both say the case, as far as they're concerned, remains unsolved. So what's going on? And can these cold or historic cases like the Zodiac Killer ever really be solved? Let's talk first about this to Dr. Abby Mitchell, who's a film studies lecturer who specialises in horror and crime. Abby, thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Why do you think the Zodiac Killer case has remained so sensational down the years? Many people will know it from the film a few years back. It continues to grip people, doesn't it?
It does, and I was going to mention the film actually because that drew attention to the fact that maybe this could be solved by an everyday man and a journalist rather than lying within the police's powers. And obviously the Zodiac Killer also sort of played up to this kind of media attention and used those ciphers, and those have remained, in the public eye for a long time. So really played into the idea that maybe there was someone out there who could solve it.
What's the latest on this case? Because there have been developments over the course of the last 2 weeks.
It was exactly as you said. There's a large group of ex-law enforcement called the Case Breakers. They've suggested that they found exactly who it was. It was Gary Post, who actually died in 2018. And they suggest that they have evidence both in those ciphers and also from matching the description to scars on his face. But, as you say, police and FBI remain sceptical, so this isn't, case closed just yet.
A lot of these cases are reviewed in the light of true crime podcasts, which are incredibly popular, Abby, at the moment. What's the attraction, do you think, and how often do they actually lead to a breakthrough or a development in a case?
Well, in terms of the attraction, there's all sorts of different explanations. I approach this from my background in horror and crime, as you said, so I'm interested in why people are fascinated by the gruesome, and there you've got some big philosophical and psychological musings about how maybe we look at gruesome things so that then we can turn off the TV afterwards and feel better about ourselves, or maybe there's something challenging in it that actually brings us all together as a society. So there's a couple of different explanations there, and I suppose true crime is a big genre, so it can depend on the individual and the particular subgenre. But your question about whether true crime has ended up solving any cases is a great one. There are some true crime films and TV series that have resulted in so much publicity that they've had an impact. So all the way back in 1988, you had The Thin Blue Line, and the publicity from that film resulted in a retrial, which then wasn't pursued. And Making a Murderer is a very famous recent series on Netflix, which resulted in hundreds of thousands of people signing a petition. So you've got some real-world impact there. But perhaps more important are the developments in genealogy. So you've got a lot more amateur genealogists now who are able to trace DNA. And so actually the Golden State Killer was caught after a 40-year hunt due to genealogy. And it's not just killers who are being identified, but also victims sometimes. So there's a great write-up in The Atlantic on a case on Lavender Doe. And they had the killer, but they hadn't identified who the victim was. And it was through advances in technology that they've now been able to do that.
So cold cases are always worth reviewing because the technology changes, our understanding of genealogy changes as well. So there's always hope that a case may still be solved.
Exactly, yeah. Technology is playing a large part, but also, as I mentioned, that publicity and stirring public interest can also have potential benefits. Often true crime is quite critical of at least the lack of resources within police departments, but also maybe more major critical failings of police and justice systems. So there's a sense that if we crowdsource this, then we can overcome those challenges.
Abby, stay with me. I'm going to introduce a former policeman now. David Swindle is an international crime expert, former detective, who led the investigation into serial killer Peter Tobin. David, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Good morning, Stephen. Yeah, I'm delighted to be involved in this discussion, actually, because only 4 weeks ago I was at the first ever UK CrimeCon event in London, and there was hundreds of true crime fans and experts like myself there sharing our knowledge. Now, as a former senior investigating officer, we are always, and I would always say that the police are sceptical of sometimes the armchair detectives, but one thing that I said, and it's down to me, I think I've mentioned it in the media a few times, is the passage of time should not be detrimental to the detection of crime. And that is proven over the years when things change. One thing about the Zodiac Killer, and I was reading up about this recent developments, is that this isn't armchair enthusiasts. This is made up of former FBI agents, forensic experts and academics. So for the police to discount the findings is a bit dangerous, and that's my feeling on that part.
When you retired from the force, when any senior detective retires, David, do some cases stay with you? Some cases that you were not able to solve, are they always at the back of your mind?
Absolutely. The case that I suppose it's the landmark case in my career was the Peter Tobin serial killer, which you mentioned there. And when I saw what Peter Tobin had done to the Polish student Angelika Kluk, I thought to myself, he has done this before. And I set up Operation Anagram to look at his whole life. Now, that was life timelining, and I called it investigative analysis of a serial killer, looking back at everything. And as a result of that, we found the bodies of 2 long-term missing persons, Vicky Hamilton and Dinah McNichol. But I called that a search for the truth about what Peter Tobin has done. And, I have been labelled in the media of being a bit obsessive by it. And the only thing about this is that we don't know everything that Tobin has done. And in my mind, he's killed other people because he buries bodies and he targets people who are vulnerable at that time. You always, as a senior investigating officer involved in these tragic cases, one thing it's about the victims. And sometimes we sensationalise the killers too much. And for me, what I do now, helping families that are killed abroad, that need help, is really, something trying to... Victims deserve the best and deserve the truth. And I take part in a few of these programmes, Crime Investigation Channel programmes about cases. And what I like doing that is that I've been able to share my experience and keep these cases alive in the media. And that's what we do with Tobin. But you're right, Stephen. I mean, you're a detective, you're a police officer, you're dealing with the worst thing that you could ever see, and you try your hardest to find out who killed that person. And there are, sadly, ones that we never find out. And you always hope that there will be a change, a development technology. And that's just exactly what Abby was speaking about there. Allegiances change, technology changes over the years, and we should never give up.
And people die as well, and family secrets are passed down, I guess, as well. David, what's your view on armchair detectives, the people who love these true crime podcasts, and the people who get involved in these podcasts to try and get to the truth?
Okay, I mean, that CrimeCon event I was at in London 3 weeks ago, it was massive, and I had never been at an event like this, and I was contributing to it, and I found it really interesting to meet the people, and a lot of these people, because I'm quite big in social media, follow me in social media, and I found it really interesting, their enthusiasm for it. And there is a place for the public to influence cases, and the public have got a right to try and influence cases and to ask questions and to present thoughts on it. It's actually what I'm doing in Spain with the Kirsty Maxwell case and Craig Mallon case, presenting evidence to the Spanish police in the hope that they will push and do things for you. There are dangers, though, and I think that's where you're maybe coming from here. There is the danger of vigilantism and a lack of control. And there's lots of well-meaning podcasts out there. If you make a TV programme, a radio programme, or a newspaper article, there are legal restrictions on it and controls. But sometimes there is not with some of the things that are going into the media. And that is where the dangers arise. But, as someone that has been an SIO and involved in the true crime arena, so to speak, I think there is a place for the true crime enthusiasts, but we have to be careful that we don't over-sensationalise it, because there's things have happened in the past with the paedophile hunters, as they're called, where sometimes vigilantes become involved in targeting individuals, and there's a danger there. But the Zodiac Killer, reading about that is really interesting, the findings of this group. And it might be the FBI are saying unsolved is a term, unresolved is a term. I would imagine that, it's dangerous not to follow that up and present it. So they might be doing other work behind the scenes that we don't know about.
David, Scotland's greatest unsolved cold case remains the Bible John killings. 20 years ago, you carried a review of that, and of course it was linked to the Peter Tobin case as well. Do you think the Bible John mystery will ever be solved as a cold case?
That's one that haunts me, because there's been a lot of speculation on that. And I'm on, yes, you're right. In 2002, there was a Detective Chief Inspector in the city centre of Glasgow. The team conducted the review of that. And then during Operation Anagram, Tobin looked at that. And, I don't know I don't think it's the same person that's involved in these three tragic killings. And there is no evidence to indicate Peter Tobin was involved in that, or any of these. I would live in hope that there will be some line of inquiry. But the problem is, these days, people, they weren't forensically aware, and they didn't know that there was DNA. I mean, DNA, a phenomenon which came in the 80s or whatever, we didn't know that. So I would like to think sometime there will be a resolution for that. But there's a danger of speculating, and a danger of unsubstantiated speculating. And one thing I always say is, the police need evidence. But perhaps this Zodiac Killer, the police have been presented with evidence in this one. Perhaps a bit dangerous to go public and name the suspect publicly at this time. Maybe it could have gone a different way it was presented. But yeah, the so-called, and I say that, Stephen, the so-called Bible John case is a tragedy, and it is something that it's been around and continues to attract media attention. And I can see why these cases attract media attention, as Abby said. Rightly so, there's been lives lost. It's the public want to know, and there is a fascination because they want to know what happened, and rightly so.
David, thank you so much for your time this morning. David Swindle, the international crime expert, former police detective who led the investigation into the serial killer Peter Tobin. And we also heard from Dr. Abby Mitchell, their film studies lecturer specialising in horror and crime. It's 10:23 on a Tuesday morning. It's